Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara Fountain and I am the CEO and founder of the Young Tongues, a peer-to-peer support group for young tongue cancer patients. Now I bring you another sensational episode today with fabulous guests, actually two guests for a change. I have with me Kelly and Tom. And I can't wait for you to hear their stories. So let's start with our usual question. Kelly, we'd like to get to know people beyond the diagnosis. So can you introduce yourself? Who is Kelly? Where are you based? What do you do?
Okay, I'm Kelly. We are based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the United States. Outside of being a tongue cancer survivor, I'm a pillar admin for a big global company, Pepsi. I'm a dog mom. We have two rescue dogs and just an all-around nerd and deeply love anything kind of sci-fi and space, and I'm into true crime and totes, but that's
That's
me.
amazing. And Tom, who are you in relation to Kelly?
I'm Kelly's fiancé. We've been together for 12 years, 13. So yeah, it has been quite a while. We know each other better than we know ourselves. So yeah, Kelly's great.
Amazing, know the feeling. So, Kelly and Tom, I'm so delighted to have you both with us today. Now, Kelly, we're just going to acknowledge for the listeners, just so we can basically wrap up your origin story of how to become a cancer survivor. You had tongue cancer twice.
Yes.
Yes. Do you want to just tell our listeners what it was like for you the first time round versus the second time round, and what the timings were in between?
So first time around, 10 as what would be for anyone a complete shock. I had a visible, I don't know what you want to call it, spot on the side of my tongue. I thought it was nothing. Ignored it for probably a few weeks. It started to really hurt, so I had a regular, just routine dentist appointment. Asked them, hey, what's this? They said, I don't know. We'll refer you to a dental surgeon. Went to them, asked, hey, what's this? We're not sure. We'll schedule for a biopsy in a month. I'm like, okay. A week goes by, and then it went from not bothering me to extremely painful. And I told them back, I said, I can't wait a month. Came back in, he took one look at it and said, I'm not touching this. I'm afraid I will do more damage to you than good. Let's get you with an ENT, which I was already established with. Went to them, biopsy the same day. The following Monday, get the report at 5 p.m., you had tongue cancer. Surgery a month later, followed by neck dissection 2 weeks later. Fast forward just about a year. So only 13 months from my first diagnosis to second diagnosis. I was having very, very bad headaches, but they were located only on the right side of my head. It felt like someone was, hitting me with a hot poker behind the eye. I thought maybe it was meditation related. I was scheduled for a follow-up PET scan, CT scan. Went in for that. Here we have, just like most places, are like my chart, and I actually saw my results before my doctors, and it said there was something on the scan, and probably within an hour, my doctor called and said, you need to come in tomorrow to deliver these results. And lo and behold, I had a tumor in the base of my tongue, throughout my mouth, so nothing visible, nothing anyone would have seen in just a visual check that you couldn't even feel that when they were doing the physical checks, it was so much between the muscles. So if it had not been for that 1 year follow-up scan, I don't know if we would have put the second one as soon, but that's a really fast.
That's incredible. So do you feel that the headaches actually came from it, or was that just a coincidence?
No, so after the surgery and the got the pathology back, it had invaded one of the nerve endings in the base of the tongue that basically fires up into the head, and that it was causing the headache. It was
That's incredible. And you were always scheduled to have a young 1 year follow-up scan following 1 year after diagnosis, which is really interesting because most of us, depending on where you live, you don't have any scans at all. I haven't had a scan since surgery, so that's quite scary. So definitely a protocol that we need to review. So Tom, spotlight on you. I guess the only question to ask is, what was it like for you? Maybe if we start the first time round. I don't know if you were in the same room when you received a diagnosis or how you found out.
Yeah, so we were together, and she was watching her phone because that's where the results are posted. And we saw it, and it was a weird suspension of reality for about an hour or two after we saw the results the first time around. And and then the doctor called, and it was really fast phone call, and everything just fell apart right there. It was, you didn't eat dinner that night, you didn't watch anything. We just stared off into space and started, later that evening just looking up, what it could be, based on what the doctor had told us. And I think we took off the next day at work and all that. Or it was a Friday, right? So maybe not, but but it was just odd to get that call right away, and we knew something was wrong. And you go through that, and then the next day you're calling everybody and telling them, something's up, and the family gets to hear about it, and that's kind of it. And I think we had the very next week, like Tuesday the following week, or like 3 days later, we had the appointment to go in and hear it all again, right? So you have to go through it all again. And
I guess that would have been your meeting with your multidisciplinary team, deciding or telling you what the sort of plan of action was and how to move forward. I just noticed you mentioned that you sort of looked up roughly what it was, the diagnosis. Do you remember? I don't know. So I stayed off Google completely. My husband Nick did that for me, and I didn't really want to ask him what he found. How was it for you? I don't know, Kelly, were you involved with the Googling, or did you take some distance?
So actually, even before my official diagnosis, I remember Googling spots on sides of the town. And I remember standing through and finding two photos that looked kind of similar to what I had. One was squamous cell carcinoma, and the other was something that wasn't cancer, so I don't remember what it was. And I remember looking at him and going, it's cancer. And I'm looking myself up. It's not cancer. This is crazy, but I don't have cancer. And then I think it was like 2 or 3 days later that I went to the ENT, and then that Monday I'm like, oh my God, it is cancer. And then anything after that, no, I kind of like, I never looked up what a neck dissection was. I never looked up what a discectomy was. I'm not doing that. I did not want to know. I would rather be sheltered from that. And how much she did, he probably has never told me. I'm sure he's a researcher by nature, so I'm sure he probably did a bunch where I wasn't paying attention, and probably never so many other things she found.
Which, to be honest with you, I find really common within our community. And then I find it really interesting in the supporters community when they talk amongst each other, is the panic seems to be way more palpable in the people that support us than in us patients. Because I think there is a bit of, it's good to have information and good information, and we get good information through either our group or through our healthcare professionals. But I think it's so difficult for our loved ones who may be looking at all sorts of pages on Google with, let's be honest, statistics that really aren't in our favour but are based on the elderly population, and that's not, those nuances aren't explained. So, Tom, what do you remember anything from that time, or what it felt like for you?
Well, I didn't really look anything up at the time. I think that the obvious concerns are there. Like, did we catch it early enough? Really, that to me was the big one, because when we saw the doctor, they went through kind of a rough plan of what could happen, and it seemed like we had caught it early enough. There were still obviously more scans to go, and to see if it had moved anywhere the first time around. And I am a beacon of optimism, though, and I say that out loud because I am. And I just kept having to reassure that it's going to be okay. That it's right there. You don't have this other kind that they talked about, which ended up being ironic in the end, unfortunately. But we just hurried along, and Kelly was the same way. We just hurry and get it over with, and it's that kind of area afterwards is a lot of worry. You sit thinking about a lot, how is it going to affect everything, really? What is Kelly going to still be working, and how far are we going to have to travel to get this treated, things like that. And I just instantly went into like prep mode too. I think I started telling her, oh, you're gonna need this and you're gonna need this, and I plan ahead too, so I probably drove her nuts for a while there. So
Kelly has a slight smile on her face. I'm a list. I'm an event manager. I just went in event mode. I was like, right, this is what we need to do. Kelly, I'm just interested, with your gastrectomy, did you have a forearm free flap the first time round?
No. So the first time around was almost a very minor surgery, in my opinion, when I compare it to what I've been through since. So the first time around, they only removed a very small portion of my tongue. I wouldn't even say it was like 1/3 of my tongue. It was just the tumor and then the surrounding margins. We didn't even do a neck dissection the same day. We went with, let's look at the tongue and then go from there. And it was the same day surgery. I went home that day. I had no drains, nothing. I was like, I'm not staying in the hospital. I'm not a fan of them. I was like, if I can go home, I'm going home. And then when I got the pathology back, my margins were clear, but the invasion was what they called deep. I think it was within 5 millimeters, and that's when my ENT at the time said, the margins are clear, no, nothing's showing on the scans, but I think to be safe we should do a neck dissection. And at that time I was like, I trust you 100%. He's been an amazing doctor. So I said, sure. 2 weeks later, I went in for the right neck dissection, and same thing. I had 2 veins. Well, no, that time I think I only had 1 vein. And I went home. I did not want to stay in the hospital. They had a room booked for me for overnight, and I said, my pain's manageable. I feel okay. I don't want to stay here. I had Tom, and he is the most amazing nurse that's not a nurse. He very good care of me, and then I went home, and once the germs came out about a week later, I felt good. I'm like, I went back to work.
Amazing.
That the next day or something, like I went back to work pretty fast. So I didn't think anything of it.
And I assume the lymph nodes they took out were clear.
The lymph nodes were negative, so we just thought that was it.
Yeah. So very much like, cool, go back to work, live your life, bye-bye.
Yeah.
See you for a checkup soon. Okay, so I guess now we come to the step change. A year goes on, you have the pain, you get diagnosed with the second tumour. I guess you kind of had a bit of a introductory, so to speak, but I think from what I know that your treatment was a lot more invasive the second time round. And shall we just quickly run through what it all involved, just so our listeners know?
So the second time I was diagnosed, this was something I don't think Tom even remembers, but he was away on business. He was in, I think, Virginia. So I was by myself, and I went to the ENT, and basically they explained that they were going to remove close to 50% of my tongue, and I was not taking that as the final answer, so I met with an oncologist, and I said, what are my options? And luckily, where I'm at in Pittsburgh, we have an amazing group of hospitals who do plenty, and the oncologist I met with said, well, there's this research study that's going on for people who have just initially been diagnosed with tongue cancer. And it was a combination of 2 chemos and an immunotherapy drug to try and help shrink the tumors. And they said, we can get you into this, but the results can't be included in our study, but there's no reason why you can't receive this treatment.
And this is before any surgery, so they're just trying to shrink the tumour.
Yeah. And that was some of the hardest months I went through. I did 2 rounds. First round went fine. I had no issues other than my hair falling out and the fatigue and, just the general side effects from chemo. I went back, it was once a month, so then I went back a month later, and I got my second round, and about 10 minutes or so into the administration of the second tumor drug, I started having an allergic reaction, and not a small allergic reaction. My entire body felt like someone had set me on fire. My heart was palpitating. I was shaking, and I just remember hitting that emergency call button, and it felt like a million nurses, but it was probably, 4 or 5. And I just remember the nurse looking at me going, you look bright red. They stopped the flow of the drug, started administering Benadryl, all sorts of different things, and then they put the drug back on, but at a much slower run, and I was fine. No issues. I finished that course of treatment. Then back to the third time, we were prepared, they did an extra Benadryl, started that second drug, and within 10 seconds, something happened. And I was basically going into anaphylactic shock. And so they stopped it, and we decided I would not receive that chemo drug anymore. So I ended up doing 2 rounds with all 3 drugs, and then that third round was 1 chemo and immunotherapy. And I went through a follow-up scans a few weeks later, and we found that the tumor had shrunk by 50%.
Wow.
Which is amazing. And
wow. So the tumour has shrunk by 50% after one chemo drug, then a third another chemo drug, and immunotherapy
Yes.
coupled up. Amazing. Okay, so I guess that offered you a lot more options in terms of surgery and how invasive the surgery would have to be.
Yes. We then discussed that I planned to go in, and it was under my unconscious impression that 50% was probably the best we were gonna get. This is just of course based on the fact that this is a new treatment, so they didn't want to put her on the surgery anymore. Now, when I was first told, I thought from the beginning I was only going to lose 50% of my time. Well, find out when I speak with the internship, then he said, oh yeah, we were originally going to remove probably close to 100%, so now we only have to remove 50%. So a little bit of shock there, because in my mind I'm like, that's not what I remember, but then I was by myself, and you kind of just go into shock when they start explaining the surgery and the fact that you need a feeding tube and a tilt and all those things that the brain just doesn't absorb all the information. So he probably told me it was 100%, and my brain was just like, we're blocking this information out. That's why going forward, I think every appointment timed in with me, because it gives you someone else to kind of absorb the information that as a patient you're just like, la la la, I don't want to hear this right now.
At some point you just don't, it's just information overload. So just checking, was that on this original meeting you had, was that the same time you got diagnosed?
The second time, yeah. So
when I
met with the ENT, he basically said, you know,
which would make sense why Tom wasn't there, because you weren't expecting, right? And I just picked up when you said, oh, I don't know if Tom remembers that. There was a big nodding. You do remember it. So I guess, what was it like for you also not being there and receiving a phone call and
Yeah, that was tough. So I was 8 hours away for work, and it was kind of like this odd movie moment, is the best I can describe it, because not only is, I'm about to get this call with this news that we just didn't expect at all, but it's also this odd setup where I work for government contractors, so I'm 5 minutes out from speaking to like a 3-star general, and here's this call, and I have to put it all on hold to answer, and I'm in the parking lot in some place in Virginia, and I said to Kelly, I picked up the phone, I said, hey, I'm about to go in, can this wait? And she's crying on the phone. No, it can't wait. So I waved down the closest person, run out the building and everything, and we had a conversation, we talked for 30 minutes, and it all just came pouring out. She said, the doctor said, I'm going to lose my tongue. They said that it's going to be a huge surgery. It's going to, be this and that, and all this other stuff can happen, tubes and horrible long recovery time, and shock. It just shocked. Like, I did go back and finish that meeting. Don't remember that meeting at all, but I remember the call. Yeah, there's probably like 4 or 5 in my lifetime, and that's definitely one of them, because it was a scan. And the thing that we're also kind of forgetting here as well is that we had gone for her headaches in between the 2 diagnoses multiple times to the doctor. It's not, this drug's not working. This drug's not working. Oh, it might just be a byproduct of the first surgery. It's swelling. It's this and that. Months go by and it's still hurting. And so we hadn't even thought, here's this pain. It's going to translate into this tumor that is, 2 centimeters by 1.5 centimeters. It's sizable, right? And so I do remember that. And after she has an allergic reaction to the drug, which now whenever somebody asks, hey, does she have any allergies, that's the one, right? So and then I start showing up to every administration before, after, and during of everything, because that's nerve-wracking too. She you don't hear anything. An hour later, she goes, I'm having an allergic reaction. There's 5 nurses around me trying to bring down, this redness and temperature and everything. So, yep, I was I was there watching her every time as soon as they turned it on. Yeah, so, but yeah, definitely the most unexpected news. Yeah.
And I get it's interesting, like for us, because we really rarely talk to loved ones, caregivers, whatever you want to call yourself, because we sort of quite often look through it, well, we always look through it through the patient lens of what it's like going through that experience, but we don't actually quite appreciate, or we do, but quietly appreciate what it's like for you guys to watch us as we go through these things. And there's absolutely nothing you can do.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing you can do other than maybe hold our hands if that is possible. So yeah, gosh, Tom, bless you. Yeah, and I guess also because you mentioned it earlier at the very beginning in terms you went into planning mode. Logistically, how does this fit into your life? Are you lucky that you've got a good employer that supported you? Did you have to take all your annual leave in order to cover? And the same question to you, Kelly, I guess, how much support did you get from your employer to have the time off and not lose your job and being able to come back?
I'll let you take a second.
So I have a very sympathetic employer. We're a small company, so it was very easy. We already were set up from the pandemic to work from home and everything, so that was a no-brainer there. Also, oddly enough, the company's founder, my boss, his wife is a speech therapist doctor who works specifically with people that have speech problems after surgery. So they were very aware of this, and it was easy. He knew everything about it. I didn't have to tell him. So I got very lucky there. My job is also one that you can kind of do on and off, and there's no real impact to it. So I basically make maps. So the world's not changing and they're not paving roads every day that need to be updated, so I'm okay. But I did use a fair amount of my time off, and they were fine with that. Excuse me. I went negative, which is something that you can do in some places, and of course we were prepared to take extended time off from my job and from Kelly's job. It was probably the first thing on our minds, because that's it. Here in America, you talk about losing your job over something like this, or going into some sort of huge medical debt. Like, that is definitely something we plan for. And I think, Kelly, you have a similar story.
Yeah, so it was very interesting because I had only been with my employer for 6 months at the time of my second diagnosis, and I was somewhat forthcoming with the fact that I had had cancer before, but I didn't go into a whole lot of depth about it. And I remember finding out I had it a second time and having to ask both my boss and HR, and I need to meet with both of you. So we got together and we sat in the office, and I had to be like, my cancer's bad, and it's worse, and we're looking at major surgery, and I don't know what else. And they said, don't worry. I was eligible for short-term disability and FMLA, so basically they helped me get set up with all of that. As I was receiving the chemo before surgery, I worked. I wanted to save my short-term disability for after surgery, so they let me work from home when I could. I did use some vacation time when I was super sick from the chemo. I just took a whole day if I had to go home early. I had my own office, so I would close the door and I had a sign that said, please not, as, at this point in time I'm compromised. and everyone was just super supportive. And then I had the surgery, and I went out on 5 months of short term, and I could have taken longer, but honestly, after 5 months, I was ready to go back. I was feeling a bit tapped into the stir pleasure in the house. As much as I love this man, only seeing him for 5 months straight, and the doctors, I was like, I need human interaction. I need to see other people. I need out of this house. And he actually encouraged me to take longer. I was still on the student too. He's like, are you sure you want to go back to work? I'm like, I need to get back to normal. And I know I'm not 100%, but I need some normalcy in my life, and I went back.
Even if it's a different type of normalcy.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that your employer was flexible, which is unfortunately not doesn't happen to everyone. But I think one of the things I'm quite grateful for, obviously I wish the pandemic would have never happened, but it does seem to have opened the door to working from home as a concept, even if it's not all the time, but at least some of the time. And I think this is a really great example of how you can accommodate people and allow people to be productive whilst they are also going through probably the most stressful thing of their life, instead of having to lose someone in your team and then replace them and so on. But also I'm obviously not too familiar with the system in the US, but I gather it is really important that you keep your job for insurance reasons. Yes, so losing your job because of going through treatment, it must be absolutely devastating beyond just beyond putting food on the table, but also being able to get your treatment. And I'm sure we'll have episodes about that in greater detail. But Kelly, I just wanted to come back to you. So we're now post-treatment, we are post-surgery. I think that will probably be around the time when I met you for the first time. And when we met you for the first time, you really struggled with your speech. I hope you don't mind me saying. No. You were in the very early days, you weren't able to eat, but oh my God, did you have a will? And I saw it in your face, and you were like, I am going to eat again. They're telling me I can't, but I am going to eat again. And your speech has dramatically improved hugely with all the exercises you've been doing and some other help. So can you just share with our listeners how you got from there to now?
I want to say sheer determination. I don't like when people doubt me or tell me I can't do something. So I had one of the doctors who was at my hospital that taught survivorship, and so he was the doctor who would do the swallow studies, which are extremely difficult because you're putting the timer down your nose and then expecting you to be able to take a sip. Something I didn't mention is that my flap, I had it the second time, but with radiation, I had 30 rounds of radiation and 5 more rounds of chemo after surgery. My flap shrank a decent amount. My tongue is tethered. It does not have any movement. I have a big gap on the side of my mouth where the flap should be. And to this doctor, he's like, you'll never be able to eat because you're missing this. You have a deficit. The food and liquid is getting stuck there and pooling there, and you're going to be on a feeding tube for life. And I'm like, no. And so I ended up meeting with him twice, and then the third time, he wasn't available, thankfully, and there was a different, younger doctor, and she said, have you thought about a prosthesis? And I said, no one has even brought this up to me. She said, I'm going to get you in touch with a dentist, and the right across the street from this office, and it's a stool, and she does amazing things with prostheses. I think that would really help you, because when talking to the ENTs, they said the only other option was to do the entire surgery again. So that's another flap, another neck dissection, another stay in hospital, and I was like, no, I can't do this again. He can't do this again. That was impossible. So I met with the dentist. I'd had the prosthesis made. That took about 3 months to do. It's a very long process. And then slowly I started just adding in the things, and I have to give a shout out to Angela, who created the tubers, which is the food that helps those of us whose tongue does not move food around in our mouth. That paired with my prosthesis.
And just to remind anyone listening who didn't listen to that episode, Toogles is basically like a chopstick, but with a groove at the end, and it's made out of wood, isn't it? Yes. So it's not metal, because there are similar things, but in metal, and that is not nice, and also doesn't work well with food. So yes, so it's a sort of and it's helped many people, and honestly, once you started using that together with the prostheses, we had I remember the meetup, because we have these monthly meetups, and you came on and you introduced yourself, and I was like, did you get a new mic, or what is going on? And you're like, no, same mic, but way more exercise. And it was incredible how for you to rehabilitate to eat also improved your speech.
Yeah,
they're so interlinked.
Yeah, the more I eat, the more I use my tongue. I even have done some movement that I will never have, 100% movement. I don't have a tip to my tongue anymore, but I can wiggle the little bit that I have, and I went from eating just super small portions to now I eat what I want, when I want, and I basically went back to my plastic surgeon that did the full-flat portion of my surgery, and told him, and he had this look of shock on his face, and as he was in, he said, oh yeah, by the way, last night I had tacos, and he's like, tacos? I'm like, yeah, I told you I was going to eat it then, I told you to watch, and that you did, and that's basically what my doctor says, that you told us you were going to do this, and you've done it. I'm like, I told you, don't doubt me.
Absolutely. And so to everyone listening, it is possible, but it's hard. We don't want to, we need to stress it. It's tough. And I know you're someone who's religious about your exercises, and we talked about it this week, that what you invest, you get out in the other end. And sometimes we go through phases where we just like, oh, I can't be bothered to massage my neck, but we have to do it in order to keep the function. So I was just wondering, just to try and get Tom back into the conversation, I guess, there is one question I wanted to ask you. Kelly, how long was your surgery? About 12 plus hours longer?
Who can speak to how long my surgery was? Because I don't remember anything. But
you don't remember?
Who has very fun stories that he has since told me?
Well, there we go. So, Tom, how long was the surgery? But also, for anyone listening whose partner or loved one is about to go into surgery, how did you navigate through the endless hours?
Yeah. Well, as we've stated here, there's been multiple surgeries. So that first one where she had just a little bit of her tongue taken off was very fast. The setup for it was obviously a lot more. A couple hours, 2 to 3 hours, and she was in recovery, and that was it. And then when she did the neck dissection I'm on the wrong side, sorry. Whatever side it was at that point, that was all day. That was 8 hours. I dragged a laptop with me and I worked. And I found a task that, is basically like matching shapes is the best I can say it. And that just pushed me through kind of mindless automaton style. And 8 hours there, and then she was good again, and she went right home. And then we get to the second one, which was the big surgery, and she was there 16 hours out. And it was to the point where they were closing sections of the hospital and telling us to go to different waiting rooms just so that we could be where they knew we were. And all the doctors coming out one at a time as you're there, telling you the status. It's amazing to think that, one doctor does his part and then just passes it to the other one and completely walks out of the room. And then when the final surgeon's done, they give it to a whole nother group just to put her back together, which nobody said anything about that going into it. But yeah, I sat there for that surgery for a long time. And I got an update after a while that said, oh no, she still has a lot to go. They haven't even, done any of the reconstruction. And so being in the area that we were, there's a lot of stuff around, and we're actually luckily enough good to be close to home there. So I went back, I took the dogs out, I had some lunch and everything, and then I went back because initially they had said it's 8 or 10 hours tops. So I show back up at, the 8-hour mark and nothing, and 10 hours and 14. It's dark. It's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And finally I get the call and they said, well, it was so long. We're going to put her in the ICU and we're going to keep her sedated overnight. And we will call you in the morning when we're ready to wake her up, and you can come in and they'll wake her up. So can you imagine that all day, 16 hours, and then suddenly, sorry, but come back tomorrow. They did let me in for 5 minutes to see her, and that was about it. And yeah, that was our first. We have the first photo there, and more tubes, more stuff than you can imagine, more than you're ever ready for. Nobody prepares you for it. You have these images, and it was nowhere near any of the expectations I had. But 16 hours, and she was lucky enough to have to go back to surgery halfway through her hospital stay because they thought they'd missed a spot, and she was getting saliva into her lower neck cavity. So they took her back for yet another 6 hours to find out that wasn't the case at all.
Oh no.
And extended her stay because as soon as they put her under and opened her back up, they said, this is going to extend your hospital stay. So they added, another 3 days on, and she was very upset coming out of that one. But I waited through that one. So I couldn't focus on movies or anything. I had to do something tactile and work for me, it's hard to, say exactly what it is, but we do a lot of just matching shapes and mat making stuff. So,
Well, my husband did hours of ironing for his mother, so that's I get. But I think that's really important. Like actually doing something, nothing that takes up too much of your brain, but something that's monotone and just makes the time go past. Because I can't imagine how slowly those hours must have passed as well. I guess Kelly. If you're anything like me, you don't remember much. Right. I just remember being very high and quite happy and very chatty, which everyone was very surprised about. They're like, rest.
I don't remember probably the first 3 days in the hospital. I remember little bits. But then I found out combining those memories with other days. Because we'll find ourselves, because we're coming up on 2 years in May of my surgery, that we'll find ourselves not so much reminiscing, but remembering and talking, because I don't remember. And so I'll ask him, I'll be like, well, did this happen? And he's like, no, I wasn't there for that. I'm like, oh. sure? Because I swear I remember you standing in the hospital and he said that definitely was not me. And it's probably a nurse. So I remember bits and pieces. I had the tit, so I could not speak. That was very difficult because I am a very chatty person and I had red blood. And I just remember anytime my doctors would come in, I had like 2 or 3 questions I would ask every time. When can I go home? When can the tit come out? And when can the germs come out? And they would always be like, soon, but no one, I'm like,
yeah, they never commit. They will never commit.
I want them out, and but they're doing what they're supposed to, and they did. But yeah, every single day was the same questions, and I think he remembers that
Absolutely.
I was just very frustrated with them.
Yeah, I sort of found the time after hospital when we came home quite vulnerable because whilst I was in hospital, there's all these medical experts that could help us with, drains or whatever. But then when you come home, that whole infrastructure just disappears. Nick had a little book, a diary of when he's given me which drug to make sure we didn't accidentally overdose myself. I can see Tom laughing away. So what was it like for you to come home?
I was happy to come home. I feel better at home. I feel that once I'm more comfortable, and even though I still had the chicken and I had the germs, we had one out of, several nurses that took care of me, but we had this one nurse, I will never forget her name. Her name was Jasmine. She was amazing. She made Tom come in, and she did him classes on how to take care of me and had him in the hospital doing what he would have to do at home. So she would be like, oh no, put the gloves on, come over here, you're gonna do it because you're gonna have to do it once he gets to go home. And he was the best RN out there. When I got home, until I could take care of myself, he did my feedings. He made, like the husband, he had a notebook with when my drugs were given. We had to monitor my drains, so he had the track of each drain, how much output it was given, when things were done. I did have an at-home nurse for about maybe a month that would come and just double check that everything was shown that they had no infections and just wishes. But honestly, he did everything.
That's brilliant.
Took care of me.
Oh, well done, Tom. Well, what was it like for you going, oh my God, I never signed up for this?
It's a lot. I have a lot to say to prospective carers, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible here, but be ready. You're going to have to assume the role of both people, the carer and the patient. Because if it's like Kelly, she didn't know what time of day it was half the time. The drugs are hard, and then you mix in treatments later on top of that, and that makes it even worse. And so you have to set yourself a schedule. You have to, set alarms. You have to keep track of everything. We were at points up to 12, 15 medications that were spread throughout the day, feedings that didn't line up with those medication times. We had notebooks and notepads, inches of paper just filled with every single instance of medication and feeding and how much, and when do we need to order more. Oh, that's a whole different story there too. Making sure that you remember to leave time to go get that stuff, and also making sure that your pharmacy has them in stock when you need them, which is a big issue for us as well. But yeah, you have to do everything. Remind when we need to do the drains and when we need to do feedings, because Kelly was just kind of there. Her job was healing, and I just took on the rest of it. And she didn't like it always, but we made it through, and eventually and very slowly we got into the routine, and she took over when she was able to stand again and feel better to move around. And we just we kept it going, probably up until you were finally below 5 or 6 medications 3 times a day, which was a month or 2 later. It's a lot. And like Kelly said, learning before you leave is key. The other half of it that is key is maybe getting a slow intro course with 2 surgeries before it, but I wouldn't recommend that, because that was it. I had more practice than anyone should have in this, and it was a long process. So.
And I'm just also conscious that we're only at the end of surgery, but radiation followed after that, I assume.
30 rounds of radiation. They were also nice to schedule my radiation at 7 a.m. every day. So
wow.
That meant we were up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock, because the radiation center there chose to go to, so that I could have radiation and chemo together. It's about half an hour from our house. Mind you, I had a different one that's only 5 minutes, but I couldn't do both at that particular location. And I couldn't drive between the flap and the tilt and not being able to turn my neck. So he was up every morning with me, and we would go days when it was just radiation. That was fit, but then I signed up for more different research. So I met with, once a week I met with a team that had a pain specialist, a speech specialist, and another third person. And so nutritionist. So we would meet with them, and he had to do most of the talking because I had severe mucosis, so I could barely talk. Then once a week I would have chemo, and he would sit with me. Those were quick sessions, probably about 3 or 4 hours worth of chemo. But as soon as I would get home, it would be do a feeding, and then fall asleep on the couch. And then I would be asleep for a couple hours. He would come and always check on me, make sure that I'm not running a fever, and I get my medicine on time, when's my next feeding due, things like that. So I basically learned it to like, you're a toddler. You're basically like a child who you can do some stuff for yourself. Now, obviously, I could bathe myself and I could use the bathroom and all those things. But anything else, you're basically like a child that just doesn't understand how to function, and so you have to really rely on the other person. And I'm very lucky that he stepped up and basically did everything. Cleaning the house, taking care of the dogs, taking care of himself, and taking care of me, all while still working 4 days. So he's a superhero.
I'm so glad we decided to do the 3 of us, because I don't think we've ever had an episode that really, really shines a light how important it is to have support, how important it is to have this help. Because we've had many people on our group going, I'm single, I don't live with anyone, and they didn't maybe not had a good relationship with their parents or friends, and they're like, I'm just going to get through this by myself, and we're like, whoa, you need help, and actual physical help, not just emotional help. So I think this has really demonstrated this. Tom, one thing I'm really interested in, because I'm sure Kelly was absolutely rocking it and absolutely fine, but I'm also fairly certain, like any human, she will have hit a wall at some point where she was just I don't want to anymore. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
How do you support through that? Because I think that's really difficult.
Yeah. In the hospital when she was recovering, that was really tough, especially, you know, when they told her you're going to stay longer, you know, because she didn't want to be there, and I don't blame her. It was not fun. It's just sitting in that room, and you know, the doctor's coming in and just kind of looking at you and go, yeah, not yet, you know. And yeah, the last 3 days in the hospital, I'd say, were probably the hardest. And I spent more time there with her in those last couple days, you know, also to try to nudge the doctor and say, I'm here, we can go, you know, kind of thing. Didn't work, but, you know, I tried to spend more time there and you know, trying to take the monotony out of it. Meet with the doctors and figure out why they're not letting her go, things like that. And then, yeah, getting out, she was fine for a long time on the just healing on the couch. I think you had like a month between the surgery and before you started the radiation, and that was good because you saw constant progress. We go to a checkup here and there, everything's getting better, things are coming out, the drains are coming out, so you had constant progress. Then you hit the radiation and the chemo, and the first time, yeah, okay, you'd built it up a little bit of stamina, so you're okay. You know, 2 weeks into the radiation, you start to get the side effects, and she was down and out and tired and everything. And then then more chemo comes along, and yeah, there was a few times she would come back and just be sleeping, and you know, we'd say, okay, we gotta, you know, get you to bed, you gotta get up tomorrow and do this again. And she just wouldn't want to do it. You know, there were tears, there was arguing, there were mornings where I'm standing there looking at my watch going, we're gonna miss this appointment if you don't get out of bed. And she didn't want to get out of bed. So yeah, it's tough, but you have to, in my opinion, you have to be firm and I remind her that this is all leading to where she is now. You know, now we can see it. It's easier to say, but at the time you're going, okay, you know, you have to remember that you have a goal and you want to get to it, and all you got to do is go and sit there. You know, yeah, it's gonna be awful, but you just go and sit there, and yeah, lots of hand holding and, you know, shielding her eyes from needles and you know, making sure that you're right there after the radiation to put the jacket back on, little things like that, because it's freezing, you know, in those places, you know, and just constant, yeah, finding things, funny playlists on your radio to get her in the car in the morning and sit in traffic every day. It was a lot. And then I think the biggest thing is you're done with radiation. You have one more chemo left, right? And this is the one I remember the most, I think. And it's stretched out, so she's had now 3 weeks at home, uninterrupted. Now you have to spend all day with your doctors and do chemo and see 15 people get stabbed 3 times with needles. And we were late. Everything was wrong that day, and we just didn't want to do it. I think both of us had it at that point, but I had to keep forcing her. And like she said, I drove her every day to make sure she showed up. I picked her up each time if it was going to be something that overlapped with something else we had to go on, and, you know, made sure before we left we talked to people. So yeah, just be firm, because the alternative is, you know, much worse. And unfortunately, you know, if you don't do it, you can end up where Kelly is now, second surgery, second time through, you know, and it's worth it. Do the treatments. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, Tom, you're so sweet. So I just to round off this hour, I guess I wanted to ask you, as a couple, things will have changed. That's just normal. But looking back, where do you feel are you now? And also, I guess, are there challenges that you are trying to work out in things in terms of how your relationship may have changed? You know, I'm not going to give you any examples of mine, but I can see. But I might have told my husband the other day, stop helicoptering around me. Yeah. I am okay. But yeah, where are we now? What is it like now? And also, I need to say congratulations on your engagement, because that is something that happened in the middle of all of this as well. So, Kelly, shall we come to you first?
So I think the stronger than before. There's nothing that's going to test a relationship more than a major health diagnosis. And my mother put it best, it's largely what true love is. It's your partner taking the time. Before I lost my hair, he spent 2.5 hours trying to brush out my hair that I had. And unfortunately, there was no saving it. That was partially my own fault for to put it in a braid. But that's true love, to sit there and do everything you can to try and take care of it, and then being the one to sit there and shave your head, and then about a week later, he shaved his head with me so that I wasn't by myself. That's it. Something that's changed is, and he's probably going to say this, is he's had to learn a whole new language, because my speech is different. And I even asked him, like, do I sound, like, verbally, I know my speech isn't the same, but like, do I sound like the person I was before? And he even said, no, it's completely different. But yeah, you have to learn, I should have said, you have to learn a new language, because there are words I can't say, and I will try and find a way. And he's sitting there trying to, like, decipher it.
Yeah. You have to. If you're a carer, you instantly become interpreter for someone that has tongue cancer, because even after the first surgery, it was complications, and then of course the second one with the flap, it was very significant. So you're around the patient all the time. You have to, pick up on things, and I think one of the things that I've been doing that's been very helpful is Kelly doesn't know when she says a word and it's not being understood, because she can't make C sounds or things like that. And so what I do is I help her. I say try this word with that, same meaning, different sound, and it doesn't have a C in it or an S or something that she can't do, and that's been really helpful too. Stuff like that. As far as the two of us, we're definitely closer now. We spend all the time together. And it just is now even more routine to spend that time together, after, she doesn't need me around to do anything anymore. We still, have long conversations. Like, that hasn't changed. We still go out and do things, and the only difference is I look at her and go, hey, do you want to, eat in the restaurant or take it home? And we just, that at the end of the day, like, that's our biggest difference from before all the surgeries, is we don't eat out as much because we're slower. It's not, there's, just not a conducive environment, and I don't want to sit in the middle of people, and then Kelly's there with that wonderful tool, and it works, but you don't need that attention, right? So but that literally, if you can put it before and after, that's it. We just don't go out to eat as much.
Well, if that's the only thing, then that's okay, isn't it? Yeah. But as long as you still go out now and again when you feel comfortable to do so, I think that's still important. I'm still one of the things I hate is eating and people trying to talk to you, and because mine's not quite as obvious, people just forget, and I'm just like if I open my mouth, you are going to see all the food. Like, it's not attractive. Just give me a moment. But yeah. No, thank you so much, Tom and Kelly. It's been an absolute delight to have you on and really insightful. And it's so great to see both points of view in terms of having a loved one, a carer, supporter, and the patient with us. And Kelly, I just want to say also thank you so much for being such an active member of our community. I know you support many people. You always show up for our virtual meetups and help others. So wholeheartedly thank you from me. It wouldn't be the same without you.
Well,
so thank you. So on that note, thank you to our listeners for tuning in once again. We will be back in a week's time. I promise. I am catching up on my backlog of podcasts and I've got my voice back again, so that's all great. And if you'd like to come on and share your story, then please reach out via podcast@youngtonguesglobal.com. Make sure you give us a follow on social media and a really nice review on wherever you are listening. Thank you so much and see you soon. Bye bye.